your one-word reaction to this text, right? One-word reaction, small scrap of paper, not a whole sheet, let's save trees. Just so I can sort of gauge in general how this went for you.
You mean like opinion?
Whatever your one-word reaction is, right? You know, try to be respectful, but otherwise, yeah, whatever you thought or felt about this. And when you have it, just pass it forward.
Name or no name?
Don't put your name on it, nope. Purely anonymous. Who else has got one? Up here? Great. Wonderful. Thank you. All right. Anybody missing? All right. You. And you. And of course, all the way in the back. All right. Thank you. All right, so let's see what we've got here. Perplexed. Are you perplexed, or does the text seem to be perplexed? That's the question. Okay. Confusing. Complex. Interesting. Intriguing. Intrigue, singular, noun. Unique. A sense of calm. Okay, that's 4 words though. Dragged on. Familiar. All right, so at least one of you knows this. Scriptured. That is a very interesting adjective. Okay. Unfamiliar. It was interestingly different. Noticing the theme here. Difficult. Yes, it is. Shocked. That's interesting. Oh, come on. Aggressive. All right, I can actually sort of see where that's coming from, and we'll address that. Self-improvement. I'm just going to put a hyphen in there. Right? Now we're down to 1 word. Let's nitpick the hell out of this. Difficult. Unique. Enlightening. Surprised. All right, we'll put that one with shocked. Confusing. Sad. That's interesting. Repetitive. Okay, so I've noticed that most of these, as usually seems to be the case, are variations on complicated, confusing, and interesting, right? So those of you who were confused by this, who found this really confusing, what about it was confusing? If you can think of anything specific, any specific elements that were hard to interpret or hard to understand. What gave you trouble? And don't say everything. Okay, let me put it to you this way then. What gave you the most trouble?
I feel like for me, like it wasn't so much that the point was confusing. It's just that I feel like it was so like dragged out to make one point. If that makes sense.
And I mean, yeah, there is one larger point here, right? There is one.
Well, I mean, even like toward the beginning when he's talking like to the God or whatever, and and the God's telling him about like the importance of action, you know, like I just feel like it took like 4 pages, like he just kept going on, and then it kind of confused me because I was like, okay, what are they talking about now? And then I realized that he was pretty much saying the same thing.
Okay.
So it was kind of hard to read from that aspect.
He's actually not saying quite the same thing, right? He's making subsidiary arguments all along the same theme, right? But what is the basic dilemma here that's presented to us at the beginning of the poem? Well, you have this guy Arjuna, right? Arjuna is a warrior. Right? He is the greatest archer of his time. And he rides to the battlefield in his chariot. He looks at the forces arrayed against him. And what does he see?
His family, his cousins.
Yeah. What we have here is a scene in a kind of a civil war, right? This is a battle not just between warring factions within a kingdom, but warring factions within a family, right? Arjuna belongs to a family called the Pandavas. He has 4 brothers. Arjuna is actually sort of the middle brother. The oldest is Yudhisthira, who is the leader of the brothers generally. He is sort of more, generally portrayed as sort of more spiritual and contemplative. He doesn't actually appear in yours. None of the brothers appear in what you read for today. These are all in the larger epic. This is taken from the Mahabharata. The Bhagavad Gita is actually a relatively late addition to a much longer epic. So Yudhisthira is the oldest brother, spiritual, contemplative. The second brother, Bhima, is enormous and strong and earthy. And then there are 2 twins, Nakula and Sahadeva, who are excellent horsemen and swordsmen. But Arjuna is generally regarded as sort of the exemplary warrior. Now, the Pandavas are the rightful heirs to a kingdom. They're opposed by their cousins, the Kauravas, who are led by a guy by the name of Duryodhana. Now, the Kauravas have really kind of jerked the Pandavas around, have denied their claims on the kingdom, and have repeatedly promised them to give them at least part of their inheritance, and have then sort of gone back on it, right? They keep going back on their word, and they won't give the Pandavas their rightful inheritance. So by this point, all diplomatic efforts have failed. All peaceful attempts to reason through the problem have resulted in nothing. So the two sides are going to war. And Arjuna rides his chariot to the battlefield. And we look on page 730, right? And there the son of Pritha saw rows of grandfathers and grandsons, sons and fathers, uncles, in-laws, teachers, brothers, and companions, all relatives and friends of his, in both of the assembled armies. And seeing them arrayed for war, Arjuna, the son of Kunti, felt for them a great compassion, as well as great despair, and said, O Krishna, now that I have seen my relatives so keen for war, I am unstrung. My limbs collapse beneath me, and my mouth is dry. There is a trembling in my body, and my hair rises bristling. Gandiva, my immortal bow, drops from my hand, and my skin burns. I cannot stand upon my feet, my mind rambles in confusion. All inauspicious are the signs that I see, O handsome-haired one. I foresee no good resulting from slaughtering my kin in war. So he looks out on the battlefield and he sees, arrayed against him, people he knows, people he loves, people he doesn't want to hurt, people he doesn't want to have to kill. And right, this is a painful dilemma, right? On the one hand, his cause is just, but in order to achieve his just goals, he has to do something that seems to him reprehensible, right? That seems to him to be immoral. If we think back again to the Greeks and Romans, right? What was the importance of family to the Greeks and Romans?
That they carry on their name.
Yeah, on the one hand, yeah, that you're right. You were supposed to have sons to carry on your name because that was the only real immortality you were going to get, right? But the family, well, how is the family related to society, the single family unit related to society by the Greeks and Romans? Exactly, yeah. It was society in microcosm, right? And what Arjuna then sort of articulates in the following pages is a similar vision of what family is, right? That family is, again, this kind of society in microcosm, right? If the family crumbles, society crumbles, right? Page 731. Though they are prepared to slay us, I do not wish to murder them, not even to rule the three worlds, how much less one earthly kingdom. What joy for us in murdering Dhritarashtra's sons, O Krishna, for if we killed these murderers, evil like theirs would cling to us. So we cannot in justice slay our kinsmen, Dhritarashtra's sons, for having killed our people, how could we be pleased, O Madhava? Even if they, mastered by greed, are blind to the consequences of the family's destruction, of friendships lost to treachery, how are we not to comprehend that we must turn back from evil? The wrong done by this destruction is evident, O Shaker of men. For with the family destroyed, its eternal laws must perish. And when they perish, lawlessness overwhelms the whole family. Whelmed by lawlessness, the women of the family are corrupted. From corrupted women comes the intermingling of classes. Such intermingling sends to hell the family and its destroyers. Their ancestors fall then, deprived of rice and water offerings. Those who destroy the family, who institute class mingling, cause the laws of family and laws of caste to be abolished. Men whose familial laws have been obliterated, O Krishna, are damned to dwell eternally in hell, as we have often heard. So what happens, according to Arjuna's logic here, if the family falls apart?
Chaos.
Yeah, complete chaos, right? Everything breaks down. First, the family breaks down. If the family breaks down, the caste system on which society is based breaks down. If the caste system breaks down, then our ancestors no longer receive the offerings we're supposed to give them, as their religious do. And so the afterlife breaks down, right? Everything falls apart. So he's looking at the family as the basic building block of order in society. You take the family out of the equation, and no longer is there any order, right? Everything drops. And having spoken, Arjuna collapsed into his chariot, his bow and arrows clattering, and his mind overcome with grief. So he's basically surrendering to despair, right? Right? This cannot be. I cannot do this. I don't care why I'm being asked to do it. And then what's Krishna's response to him? Why should Arjuna fight anyway? Go ahead, Jacqueline.
He has to uphold his obligation as a warrior or something.
Yeah, and this has to do with the social class system that Arjuna is a part of, right? Which is kind of an integral part, particularly of early Hindu religion, right? Essentially, you are born into a particular class. And the class you are born into determines not only your social status, but also the duties that you are expected to fulfill while you are alive. So the highest class are the Brahmins. And Brahmins were priests and scholars, the spiritual intellectual class. Beneath them, the Kshatriya, I don't know if I'm actually pronouncing that correctly. I know how to spell it, I don't know how to pronounce it. These would have been worldly rulers and warriors. Right? The Kshatriya concern themselves with things of the world and with the potentially spiritually polluting activity of war and killing, so that the Brahmins don't have to, right? So the highest class can remain spiritually and ritually pure. Beneath the Kshatriya, the Vaishya class, merchants and skilled laborers. Probably the most varied caste. And beneath the Vaishya, right, sort of the lowest rank that one could be born into and still be born into a caste, the Shudra, who are sort of general unskilled laborers, often rural laborers. Now, there are local and regional variations on this system. It's not, these classifications aren't completely universal throughout modern India. They weren't completely universal throughout ancient India. Different regions would put people in different classes sometimes, and there would also be sort of subclasses within various castes. But for our purposes, right, these are the four primary castes. Now, do you notice anything about these four castes and the characteristics I gave you of these five brothers? Technically, as the sons of a king, they would all be Kshatriya. But one of them is spiritual and contemplative. One of them is immensely strong and earthy. Another is skilled in the arts of war. And the last two are skilled in a variety of different things. Right? Each brother, or in this case, pair of brothers, corresponds to the values of one of the castes. And Arjuna is representative particularly of the duties and interests of the Kshatriya class. Right? There are also people who are considered outside of the caste system, people who don't have a caste. They prefer to be called Dalit. The word that used to be used for them was untouchable. Because if you were someone who had a caste, it was considered spiritually polluting to have contact with someone who was a Dalit. Usually, these were people who did work that was considered unclean in some way. So leather workers, right, because you have to touch dead things. People who prepare bodies for burial, street sweepers, sewer cleaners. So these kinds of jobs became hereditary. And the people who did them often sort of had to live in their own villages or their own neighborhoods and be cut off from contact with people who did have a caste. They were also often forbidden from visiting temples because it was considered that their presence would pollute the atmosphere of the temple. Okay, so as a Kshatriya, Arjuna has the duty to fight if called to fight in a just cause. Right? Does anybody know what this particular duty is called? What name does Krishna use for Arjuna's duty? The function he must perform that is sort of central to his character. Does anybody remember what word was used for this? Yeah, exactly. Good, Jacqueline. Yes. Yeah, the word is dharma. And everyone's dharma is different. It's dependent not just on your class, but also on your age, your marital status, your gender, and your stage of life, right? So the dharma of a young unmarried student is different from the dharma of an elderly married person who owns a house. And by following your dharma, by following your particular duty for your particular station in life, you accumulate karma. And the point of accumulating karma is to move yourself sort of up the ladder of forms when you die. Right? When you die, you will be reborn in another body. You'll have no memory of your previous life. And whether you move up or down the ladder depends on how well you followed your dharma. The eventual goal is to move beyond the ladder altogether, right? To sort of ascend to be, one with the Godhead in the universe. But you only do that by progressing through all of the stages of life. So if you are a Shudra and you follow your dharma to the letter, when you die, you can be reborn as a Vaishya. And so on and so forth. If as a Vaishya you fail to follow your dharma, when you are reborn, you'll be moved back down to the Shudra class, right? And so on and so forth until you get each stage right and move on to what's called moksha, or salvation. So, this is actually all part of Krishna's argument, right? If we look at the beginning of chapter 2, right, the Lord said, the Lord being Krishna, right? Krishna is a god. More specifically, he's actually a manifestation of a more powerful god. And Arjuna is aware of this, right? He's aware that Krishna is a god. but Krishna also happens to be his best pal and the guy who drives his chariot. So the Lord said, "Although you seem to speak wisely, you have mourned those not to be mourned. The wise do not grieve for those gone, or for those who are not yet gone. There was no time when I was not, nor you, nor these lords around us, and there will never be a time henceforth when we shall not exist. The embodied one passes through childhood, youth, and then old age, then attains another body. In this, the wise are undeceived. Contacts with matter by which we feel heat and cold, pleasure and pain, are transitory, come and go. These you must manage to endure." So, what is Krishna, how is Krishna here addressing Arjuna's worries, right? Arjuna doesn't want to destroy his family, right? He doesn't want to kill members of his family. What is Krishna telling him here?
That you're just going to die and be reborn again.
Yeah, so can Arjuna actually destroy anyone? No. His power to do them harm is limited to their physical bodies. Right? Their souls will endure. Just as Arjuna's soul has always existed and Krishna's soul has always existed, right? Everybody on that battlefield, right? Their souls have always existed and will continue to exist when their physical bodies are dead. Right? So if you are worried, Arjuna, about destroying your relatives, you can't, right? You can't do them permanent harm. Non-being cannot come to be, nor can what is come to be not. The certainty of these sayings is known by seers of the truth. Know it as indestructible, that by which all is pervaded. No one may cause the destruction of the imperishable one, the soul. Bodies of the embodied one, eternal, boundless, all-enduring, are said to die. The one cannot. Therefore take arms, O Bharata. This man believes the one may kill. That man believes it may be killed. Both of them lack understanding. It can neither kill nor be killed. It is not born, nor is it ever mortal, and having been will not pass from existence. Ancient, unborn, eternally existing, it does not die when the body perishes. How can a man who knows the one to be eternal, both unborn and without end, murder or cause another to? Whom does he kill? Someone who has abandoned worn-out garments sets out to clothe himself in brand new raiment. Just so, when it is cast off worn-out bodies, the embodied one will encounter others. Right, so death is here compared to almost like throwing away a worn-out suit of clothes, right? You will acquire another one. Now, does this mean that Arjuna can just go around happily slaughtering people? Absolutely not, right? What this does mean is that he should not be concerned about destroying members of his family if he is fighting in a just cause, right? If he is doing his duty as a warrior to claim his family's rights when all peaceful avenues have been exhausted, right? There is no sin in killing these people just because they're his relatives. Right? He can't destroy them, he can't do them permanent harm. They will come back in another body. So his problems regarding, the morality of attacking your members of your own family are rooted largely in an older system of belief. The Bhagavad Gita dates from about the 1st century BCE. The Mahabharata, the larger epic that this is part of, is older. I think roughly sort of 6th century BCE. So this is a relatively late addition to the text by a different author or set of authors. We don't actually know for sure who wrote either. Now, there is an older set of Hindu religious texts, well, sort of pre-Hindu religious texts, that date from roughly 1000 BCE. I think that's when the latest of them is composed. These are called the Vedas. Now, when we think about the ancient world religions we've looked at before, right? The Greek religion, the Roman religion, the Babylonian religion, how did the human relationship with the gods work in those religions? If you're an ancient Greek, what do you want from the gods? How do you interact with them? Yeah, you pray or...
Have mercy on them, I guess.
Exactly. It's a transactional relationship, right? You offer them prayers, you offer them sacrifices, so that they will either give you something that you want, or, more likely, so that they will leave you the hell alone, right? In general, you don't want the attention of ancient world gods. You would prefer they stay far, far away from you. The Vedas are really pretty similar in that sense, right? It is largely, ritual formulas and prayers that are largely sort of devoted to appeasing gods that are in a lot of ways pretty similar to the Greek and Roman gods. In fact, they probably come from a very similar cultural root. Greek, Latin, and Sanskrit, the ancient language of India, are actually very closely related to each other. So, like, for example, in the Vedas, there's a sun god, Surya, and Surya rides a chariot around the sky that has a blazing disk upon it, right? So is actually like the physical sun riding around in a chariot, much like the Greek concepts of the sun, right? The Greek god Helios. By the time we get to the Bhagavad Gita, this sort of ancient pre-Hindu religion has competition. There are two offshoots of Hinduism that become popular after about the 6th century BCE. Buddhism and Jainism. Jainism. Does anybody know anything about Buddhism or Jainism? Like what the basic, very basic ideas behind these religions are? What you have to do in both of these religions to attain salvation? Well, I'll tell you what was attractive to 6th century BCE Indians. The pre-Hindu religion didn't really offer any path to salvation, right? It was much like those other ancient world religions where you just tried to get the gods to stay away from you. Buddhism and Jainism did offer you a path to salvation. You could transcend this plane of existence. You could get beyond it, mostly through renunciation. Right? You renounce things of this world. You renounce your attachments to worldly things. Yeah, go ahead.
Wasn't Buddhism like peaceful and like meditation? It was like big into meditation.
Yeah, meditation is a big thing in Buddhism. It's also a big thing in Jainism and in Hinduism. Just sort of sitting and sort of focusing the mind inward. But yeah, meditation is a big thing in Buddhism. Nonviolence is a big thing in both Buddhism and Jainism. Although the strict, there have been some problems in contemporary India with militant pacifist Jain sects. Jains are also expected to be strictly vegan. In fact, they can't have a temple that's within a certain radius of any place where meat is cooked. And this has actually become a problem in some cities in India that have large Muslim populations, because the Jains will come in and build a temple and then demand that all the Muslim restaurants that have maybe been there for generations either, close up shop and move out, or stop serving any animal products. So this is something that, when I talked about militant pacifism, this is an example, right? But yeah, both of these religions stress renunciation of all worldly things in order to get yourself out of the cycle of reincarnation, right? You don't want to be reborn in another body. You want, a straight path to ascend to the Godhead. Renounce all things of this world. And Buddhism in particular, in the 3rd century BCE, had spread across northern India during the reign of an emperor by the name of Ashoka, who was himself a convert to Buddhism. And so he encouraged the spread of Buddhism. And so the adherents of the older sort of proto-Hindu religion kind of felt under threat from these newer faiths. Although, to be a Buddhist is relatively difficult. To be a Jainism has always remained a rather small sect because it's really, really difficult to follow. You have to be willing to give up most contact with other people, wearing clothes, eating animal products. There are these sort of monasteries in various parts of India where Jains just kind of live by themselves. So there are some sort of direct ripostes in here to Buddhism and Jainism. If we look, for example, on page 735, your concern should be with action, never with an action's fruits. These should never motivate you, nor attachment to inaction. Established in this practice, act without attachment, Arjuna, unmoved by failure or success. Equanimity is yoga. Bless you. Action is far inferior to the practice of higher mind. Seek refuge there, for pitiful are those moved by fruit of action. One disciplined by higher mind here casts off good and bad actions. Therefore be yoked to discipline. Discipline is skill in action. Having left the fruit of action, the wise ones yoked to higher mind are freed from the bonds of rebirth and go where no corruption is. When your higher mind is crossed over the thicket of delusion, you will become disenchanted with what is heard in the Vedas. When unvexed by revelation, your higher mind is motionless and stands fixed in meditation, then you will attain discipline. Okay, so when Arjuna acts, right, and the basic argument of the entire piece, right, is that Arjuna must act, right? That's the basic thrust of all of this. He has to act. When he acts, how should he act?
Without attachment.
Without attachment, right? So what does it mean to act without attachment? Yeah, not so much don't think of the consequences at all, but don't think about what you're going to gain from acting, right? Act without regard for personal gain. You're going to get a kingdom out of this. Okay. So what? Right? The worldly kingdom isn't the point. The worldly goods you will receive from acting are not the point.